Caitlin Highland is the Director of Strategic Communications at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, where she manages the team responsible for the organization's messaging, earned media, and digital properties. Prior to joining GBPI in 2019, Caitlin worked as the press secretary for Stacey Abrams' 2018 gubernatorial campaign and Fair Fight Action. She previously worked on a variety of campaigns and as a digital fundraiser at Emily's List. She serves as the treasurer of the board of Reforming Arts, which teaches arts education in Georgia prisons and to returning Georgians. Please put your hands together for Caitlin Highland.
Picture this. It's November 6th, 2020. Your eyes, like those of everybody else on Twitter, are glued onto Steve Kornacki as he calls election results. And then they call it. Georgia's going to have not one, but two federal runoffs. Runoffs that could decide control of the US Senate. Over the next 2 months, 4.5 million votes will be cast, $443 million spent, and too many out-of-state helpers to count will parachute in for their moment of glory. But you don't know that yet. All you know is that everybody is now paying attention to Georgia, and it's a moment that can't be wasted. Still, it puts an organization like the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, a 501c3 nonprofit, in an odd position. We can educate to our heart's content. We can even do a little lobbying, but we cannot wade into electoral campaigns. What was our role here? We didn't know the answer to that question, and we certainly didn't know that it would shape not just the next couple of months, but the next year of work and possibly beyond. This is our story, the story of a small nonprofit and how we had to navigate a moment where our role wasn't clear, as well as the answers to the questions we had to ask ourselves along the way. The first question was, how do we insert ourselves into this conversation? It will surprise nobody in this room that think tanks are not seen as cool as campaigns. Everyone was focused on the horse race, with too few people thinking about what was truly at stake here. This wasn't about the letter that would go behind a senator's name. This was about the policy that would affect the lives of Georgians for the next years to come. Now, at the same time as these runoffs, the federal government was debating COVID relief measures that were going to have a critical impact at Georgia, because hardship was still very high. At this time, 59% of Georgia families weren't sure that they would be able to put food on the table for the next 4 weeks. 500,000 Georgians were filing for unemployment insurance every month. And because the effects of COVID-19 had disproportionately harmed our state's communities of color, it was critical that relief measures flow to these communities too. Up until this point, GBPI had dabbled in federal relief work. A blog post here, a Twitter thread there, with no real concerted effort to inform the debate. But when the center approached us at the end of the year, we were interested in engaging in this work. Still, we were busy planning for legislative session, for our annual policy conference, doing end-of-year grant reporting, and so much more. Thankfully, the center offered resources that would not only help us execute the work, but also bring on additional capacity. We leapt at the chance. This was our entry point to the conversations happening in our state. But it brought us to our second question. How do we bring other groups into the fold? You see, we knew we didn't want to be the lone voice talking about these policy issues. In particular, it was critical to bring organizations closer to the grassroots and to their local communities. But those same end-of-year tasks keeping us busy, we're bogging them down too. Some do voter registration. Others, including some involved in our proactive revenue agenda, People-Powered Prosperity, have C4s. It was election season for them. We knew that whatever we did, it needed to offer some low-lift ways for organizations to engage. After talking to the team and to our consultants, we landed on two ideas: a sign-on letter, which I'll come back to later, and a day of action. We planned to have our day of action just a couple of days before we thought Congress might vote on federal relief measures. We started putting together a toolkit for our partners and soliciting signups. But with just a couple of days before the day of action was set to happen, we didn't have many people signed up yet. I was getting a little worried. I reached out to our director of strategic campaigns, who had just hopped off the phone with one of our close-in partners, someone who I had been pretty disappointed to see had yet to sign up. She mentioned something that made a lot of sense to me, though. At GBPI, we have 3 full-time communication staffers. For a state-level nonprofit, that's a lot. Many of our partners don't have a single person dedicated to communications. They rely on their national partners for not just the execution of their comms work, but in many cases, approval of things like participating in a day of action. And those partners needed some more details. This was a time when Congress's inability to meet their own self-imposed deadline worked in our favor, because we were able to push back the day of action just a couple of days. We finished up our toolkit so that we could circulate it to our partners, including sample social media graphics and posts, talking points, data, links to call senators, templates for press releases and emails, and goals for the day. And all of a sudden, the signups started flooding in. In fact, we had 36 groups signed up, and on the day itself, we had basically everyone posting on either Twitter or Facebook, dozens calling their lawmakers, 17 groups committing to send an email or a press release, organizations ranging from the Black Child Development Institute of Atlanta to 9 to 5 Georgia to Step Up Savannah to the Small Business Majority, all engaged in that day. We were finally no longer the only group talking about these policies at this time, but we needed to build on that more, which led us to our third question. How would we reach people directly and generate buzz? We had talked about doing a paid media campaign, blanketing the state with radio ads and putting a billboard ad in a high-traffic location, somewhere where our lawmakers might be during recess. We'd put together what we thought was a robust paid media budget, but it turns out that in the age of this double federal runoff, it just wasn't enough. As quotes started coming back to us, we knew that we couldn't afford all that we wanted to do. At the same time, I was pitching the media as quickly and efficiently as I could. I like to think I'm pretty good at getting earned media. I'm a former press secretary. I know the media landscape in Georgia like the back of my hand, but no one was biting. You know, they were more interested in the folks talking about the sensational aspects of the runoff, not so much the policy and the facts. And so we knew that we had to pursue another method. And we decided to deploy what's called a ring of fire strategy. If you're not familiar with a ring of fire, it's where you stack tactics on top of each other in the hope that both you reach everyone in your target audience at least once, and you reach many people multiple times. So maybe they first see a tweet where you're talking about how federal recovery package policies need to flow to communities of color. And they think, that makes sense. And then they see a paid ad in their local paper outlining the policies to help get us there. And they think, yeah, those policies would help my community. By the time they get a text message from you asking them to reach out to their lawmaker in support of those policies, they're ready to take action. We landed on 3 tactics for our ring of fire. The first was a full-page ad in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I've been skeptical about taking out a full-page ad in the AJC. There's a reason that they're the paper of record in Georgia. They have a huge audience. But it's mostly people in the Atlanta area, and those outside of the metro area tend to be our usual stakeholders. They're fellow politicos or policy wonks. I like to reach new audiences most of the time, so that has never usually been the effective method for me. But this time we wanted to create buzz. And let me tell you, taking out a full-page ad in the AJC creates some buzz. We decided to run our sign-on letter with nearly 70 organizations representing a wide range of constituencies in our state signing on. We sent a press release and some social media posts announcing the ad. We timed it to our day of action, and we really got people talking. All of a sudden, we had candidates retweeting us, TV reporters asking sitting senators about our demands, and so many of our partners and other stakeholders were just excited about how much real estate we had in the AJC that day. We'd officially made some noise, and so we could turn to our other two tactics, the ones about reaching people directly. Now, GBPI has done direct voter contact before, but I wasn't entirely sure how it would go during this double federal runoff. You know, my own phone was blowing up with text messages and phone calls every day. My door was getting knocked all the time. I was just a little worried that we might get lost in the noise. We decided on two tactics, though. We decided on broadcast text messages, which is where somebody sits at a computer, presses a button, and a message goes out to thousands of Georgians all at once, asking them to send a letter to their lawmaker, asking for the policies that we thought would lead to an equitable relief package. The second was patch-through calls, where people would dial out to Georgians, read about the policies that we were hoping would be enacted and the end goals there, and then ask people if they would be willing to be immediately patched through to their senator. Thankfully, my worries about getting drowned out were completely unfounded. We were able to send 576 letters to our lawmakers and 1,000 calls to their offices, too. We'd had to make some tough choices, but in the end, it was successful. In late 2020, Congress did pass a relief package that included stimulus checks, some improvement to unemployment insurance, and other policies. At the same time, this was not the bold, transformative change that was needed to ensure an equitable recovery, and we knew that there was more work to be done. So we had to ask ourselves one last question: what comes next? Thanks to our success in late 2020, the Center and other funders have continued to support our work. We've spent the last year advocating for policies that would bring additional fiscal relief to Georgia, close the coverage gap to help more Georgians, and particularly communities of color, access health insurance, ensure that the child tax credit includes undocumented children, and more. We're still fighting about many of those policies today, but it's allowed us to stretch our research, our communications, and our outreach muscles. Our research team has built phenomenal relationships with our federal lawmakers. These are relationships that we did not previously have. And partners in the media have also begun to turn to us when they want to talking about federal policy. Still, when it was time for me to think about what I wanted to talk about with you all today, I had to ask myself just one final question. What will your state face? Will your state have a double Senate runoff to decide control of the chamber? Probably not. But maybe you have a recall election, High California, or the country's most talked about senator, West Virginia, or Arizona. Maybe in the next couple of years, your governor decides to run for president. While the exact circumstances that made everyone think about Georgia in late 2020 might never be replicated again, what is replicable is these moments where all eyes zoom in on your state and you need to figure out your role so that you can inform the narrative. Hopefully, when that time does come to your state, and it will, you can learn from the challenges and the successes of GBPI in 2020 to advance policy that advances economic opportunity and racial equity in your state. Thank you.